again, everyone. Welcome back to Eastern Shore Talk, your podcast for all things self-care and movies. If this is your first time, welcome. We're glad to have you. We are now on episode 27. I'm Jay Watson. And Kathy's a little slow on the draw today.
I'm slow.
But we've got a special guest that's going to talk a little bit about his story and how he incorporates self-care and yoga with some first responders. So, Kathy, I'll let you introduce Vance.
Yeah, so I am so honored to be able to introduce my good friend Vance Row, and Vance is a really cool guy, and I can't wait for him to talk on this podcast. He, I think he's a bit of a podcast celebrity. He speaks on a lot of different podcasts, so we're glad to have you as podcast royalty. But I guess I first got to know Vance really probably through social media, actually, because Vance and I have a mutual friend that had a son that took his life by suicide. And Vance had leaned into that family and really had offered some assistance with helping them cope through their grief. And I don't know, somehow in the process I either caught on to his story or his post, and I really liked what Vance had to say about alternative ways to help people heal and become calm their central nervous system, perhaps, and find ways just to be better with maybe some of the traumas that they had. So then we were able to talk and get to know each other and attend some things together. And I really like what he's doing in the first responder military space. So I thought it would be a great guest to have here. And I'll let him tell his story, but former OC, Ocean City police guy, and now works dispatch in Ocean City and has this really cool schedule. But I'll let him tell about himself. Pretty cool guy.
So I hope I can live up to that intro. So thanks for having me, you guys.
Oh, absolutely. So Vance, tell us a little bit about where you've come from and how you've kind of gotten to this point.
Yeah, I certainly will. So if you go back to like early life, I am actually born and raised in Baltimore. And I spent a lot of summers down here in Ocean City. And I went to college outside of Philadelphia, but in the summertime, I would work at the beach down here. And my first job, I was 19 years old, and that's when I first started working for the police department. And it wasn't like something super cool, like I was the police, but I was a meter maid. And so I would I'd play football when I would go back to college. I would do criminal justice classes. I'd come down and I would do stuff like writing tickets, traffic directions. So that was my first 2 summers. And then at 21 years old, I became a seasonal police officer, which was super cool because I got to do the same things that a regular police officer gets to do. And I was still in college at the time, so it actually made college life make more sense to me because I had a little bit of job experience, which, who at 21 years old has job experience, especially in law enforcement. So it was pretty special. And then later on in my career, I actually got involved in the actual recruiting and background and training of all those people. So it really kind of comes full circle. It's a neat, I don't know the word I'm looking for, but neat little circle there. So I got done college and I worked in Salisbury City Police briefly. That's who I went to the police academy with. And I spent about a year there. But the goal had always been that I was going to come back to Ocean City. That's where my roots were. That's really what I liked doing. I liked being like on the boardwalk. I especially liked working at night. I especially liked being on a bicycle. So that was the goal. And in the summer of 2002, I started my career as an Ocean City police officer. And I worked for, in total, I worked 20 years in the Ocean City Police. And I did a lot of patrol work. Generally in the patrol region, summertime, I'd work at night and I'd work on the boardwalk. So we'd be busy. And a lot more of the serious crimes in that very late at night, early morning kind of thing, where there'd be investigations, things like stabbings, rapes, things like that. And then I was only 3 years into my career when I got picked by uh, one of our lieutenants, and he asked me if I was interested in an administrative job. And I said, well, what is it? And he goes, well, you're going to work in the training and recruiting section. And I said, yes, before I even knew what the job was. I was like, yeah, man, I like you. I definitely want to work for you. Um, so what that job ended up being was actually traveling to a lot of colleges and talking about what it is to be a police officer, trying to get them to come down and test. And then eventually I would learn how to do backgrounds, and I would learn how to actually do their training. And that became uh, so my year started to look like September, I'd go into this admin work. And then every April or May, I would go back to patrol work. So I kind of did both for a lot of years. And, having all that background in that uh, set me up for kind of where I ended up, which was the last thing that I did in my police career was I was a polygraph examiner, and I was Ocean City Police's first polygraph examiner. So they had sent me off to school at a Army base in Pennsylvania for 12 weeks, which is the hardest school that I have ever been to. And then I came back and I got to build a polygraph program, which I didn't know anything about. So that's interesting, and it allowed me to leave my thumbprint
Yeah.
kind of on that program, on the people that are still there. And so this is kind of when some of the things start to happen to me, that I start to see changes. And I kind of want to tell you some of the things that were going on, and they're kind
Sure.
of gonna, and I'll go kind of chronologically. So the first thing is, I told you I was, our first polygraph examiner, and I was our only polygraph examiner for about 2 years. And we were still trying to hire 100 summer cops every single year. And if you know anything about how hard like polygraph is with actually getting through it, and then the number of people that actually get hired even after they pass it because of disclosures, um, you got to test like 400 people to get to 100. It's just that there's just a really high attrition rate in going through that. So I was doing a lot of testing, and I don't expect that you guys, and I don't expect any of your listeners to know what a polygraph is, but I'm sure everybody's seen it on TV, and I promise the real thing is not nearly as cool.
Yeah.
It's a lot of just sitting in front of somebody and being able to build rapport, and actually being able to kind of talk through some issues so that they can pass a polygraph test. But the big thing is, I would have 2 appointments a day, and each appointment would be somewhere between 4 and 6 hours. So I was working an awful lot of hours. Um, and then that was just doing the tests. And then I'd have to go back and I'd have to write the reports. So then in the summertime, I would go back to this patrol schedule where I'd work 5 and 6 nights a week. And what it became was 9 and 10 months a year, I was working these 50 and 60 hour weeks. And I was just exhausted, like all the time. And on the one day that I'd have off, all I want to do is sleep. And the idea of getting off my couch sounded awful. I was just kind of there. Like I'm on the couch and my eyes are open, but I'm not really there.
Yeah.
Uh, just tired, and you just can't catch up at that point. Um, so that grind had really kind of gotten to me. Uh, I had I did not have a great environment work wise in my administrative job at that point. My supervisor and I certainly did not get along. That did not help with what was going on with me. And then I've told you a little bit about polygraph, but um, there's some pretty deep things that you end up getting into with people. And there's an awful lot of people in this world that have now told me things that they had never told anybody else.
Yeah.
Things that had either happened to them or that they had done to another person. And that stuff started to affect me. So
Hmm.
you start to compile all of these things kind of on top of each other. I can't point to one incident and say, yeah, there was this really bad car wreck in this year and this is what it did to me. It was just these combinations of cumulative stress that would just kind of build and build and build and build. Um, so I want to tell you what my negative coping mechanism was at the time, which was on that one night off that I would have. Uh, much like a lot of people in the first responder cultures, we'd go out and drink. And I usually wasn't, I usually wasn't totally satisfied until like I had gotten well past the point of remembering the night. So, I had a significant hangover the next day, but I had never had anybody talk to me about like taking care of your mind, taking care of your central nervous system. And the only thing that I had ever known was football and law enforcement. And I, all I can say about it is like you're always supposed to push through. That's what I was taught in football. That's what I was taught in law enforcement. Hey, sometimes it sucks. Sometimes you hurt. Who cares? Just keep doing it. And I kept doing that.
Yeah.
No matter how exhausted I was, I just kept showing up, and I just kind of got really, really ground down to the point where in the summer of 2016, after a particularly bad night at work, I told my wife that I didn't want to do this anymore. So at that point, I had been in Ocean City for 14 years, and I just had it. I'm burned out is what I can look at it now like, but I just knew that I didn't want to do that anymore. And she was like, "Well, you can't quit tonight," because she's the reasonable one, and she's like, "But we can make a plan into the fall or into the winter." Now, what happened was we never get there. And the reason we don't get there is because October 1 of 2016, I get hurt while I'm working, and I tear up my left knee. It's not even like a cool story. It's not. It's not like I wish I could tell you I was chasing a bank robber, but it's not. I literally like my bike tire hit between two pieces of concrete, and I went flying over the handlebars, which I always like snicker to myself. Like I wonder if somebody has a video of it because it was probably pretty funny to watch. But anyway, it tore up the tendon in my left knee, and my knee to this day is fine. But what it did is it caused nerve damage in my foot, and so my left foot burns all the time. And that's what ends up costing my law enforcement career. So that what I just summed up for you that ends up costing me my law enforcement career, I summed up for you in about like 6 seconds. That process takes 6 years.
Mm-hmm.
And so here's where I really start to have trouble. So 2016, I get hurt. And they tell me, listen, nerves regenerate. It might take a little while for this to come back. So I have in my mind that it's going to take until the fall of 18 and I'm going to be better. And then I'm not. And I expect that the police department or the town is going to be like, all right, well, you can't be a police officer anymore. So we're going to do something else. And nothing ever happened. And this is even me offering, hey, why don't you guys make me a civilian? So you can promote somebody else to corporal and you can hire another police officer. Because right now I'm not doing the job you pay me for. But nobody wanted to make a decision. And that just started to get really, really heavy on me. I can tell you that the drinking really started to amp up at that point. And I didn't know I was doing that. It wasn't like an intentional thing like, oh, it's time to hit happy hour. I'm really feeling kind of terrible. It was just, it just got to a point where for me, it was every night. And it was varying degrees of intoxication. And quite a few times during the week, there would usually be like blackout drunk, just passed out on the couch, not exactly sure how I got there. But nobody knew other than my wife. And I mean, she had said some things to me, like she didn't want to babysit me or anything like that, but it never gotten to the point where it finally gets. And so that goes on for a while. And I'm really starting to feel like I had lost purpose, which I didn't realize that's what I was feeling at that time, but I felt lost. The one thing that I knew for 20 years of my life that I had devoted all my blood, sweat, and tears to, that every time somebody showed up or, every time a supervisor was like, hey, we need somebody to come in and work a shift, Vance, can you do it? And I'm like, yeah. Hey, we got this really terrible detail and it means you're going to have to stay over tonight. Vance, can you do it? Yeah. What happens when Vance asks?
Yeah.
It's not even like they said no. They just went, I don't know. And I really started to spiral out of control at that point. So like I said, the drinking was bad. The idea of suicide became an option. Uh, and I will tell you that I started having these thoughts of just not being around. And it started with, hey, maybe I just won't wake up tomorrow, and then this can all just be over. And it was like, that'll just be okay. And then I actually came up with I had a plan of what I was going to do. Uh, and what really happened at that point was a former Salisbury police officer, Aaron Hudson, had taken his life, and this is in late 2018, and that scared the hell out of me, because I had the same thoughts in my mind when he did that, and I saw what it did to the community. I saw what it did to the police department. I saw what it did to downtown Salisbury. I mean, you still now, we are close to 6 years out from that event, and still people feel it. There are memorials to him. I mean, like, that left an enormous hole. That is the first time that I tell my wife that I'm like, I am having these thoughts. She had no idea. She knew the drinking had gone kind of haywire, but she had no idea what was going on with me. I will tell you that we start talking to my family care doctor, and we start coming up with a plan and modifying the medication for nerve things and therapist related things. I can tell you that I was not honest with her about the amount I was drinking at the time. And that, I'm sure, played into the part of, like, the medicine's not really going to work the right way because you're, taking a bath in alcohol every night. So what finally cracks, honestly, is in late 2019, and I need to pause just for a second. So it's after Bull kills himself. I know that I have a problem with alcohol, but I don't know what to do with it. So I try to prove to myself a couple times. I stopped drinking for a week. I stopped drinking for 2 weeks. I stopped drinking for a month, and I'm like, see, I'm not an alcoholic. And then what would happen is the next time I'd go back, I would make up for lost time. So at this time, in the fall of 19, I had been sober for 6 weeks. And I thought, I got this. I can control it. And we were hanging out with like 12 friends, and we had a staycation, and I tied it on for 2 straight days, to the point where my wife, Amy, actually took videos of me, of what I look like when I'm drunk and how out of control I was. And the next day she confronts me and she's like, we got to talk. And she shows it to me. And I can't tell you the amount of shame and embarrassment that brings, that like this person that you love and respect the most in the world is like, dude, you got a problem. And that was really hard for her, which I don't think I realized at that time, to take that like baller move of, hey, straighten up. So I was like, I'm not going to drink today. And that's really how it started. I did not intend that day to stop drinking altogether. It was just, I don't want to have this talk ever again. So I'm not going to drink so I don't have to have this talk.
Yeah.
And then I started putting days together. I started putting weeks together. I've now put months and years together. And at this point, on November 12th, it'll be 5 years since I've had a drink. And, there's a lot of freedom in that, in the fact that I was giving up so many things in my life because I wanted this one thing. Now, by giving up that one thing, it's opened up so many other doors. It's amazing. Within days of that confrontation was the first time that I ever went into a yoga studio. And I cannot explain to you what made me do that for the first time. Because, Jay, I know you, I mean, like, this little box, it probably, I don't know if you can tell my size, but anything that you know of yoga or you've seen on Instagram, I don't look like a yoga teacher. And I don't,
Right.
I don't look like, one of those yoga people standing on some pretty rock in Sedona, Arizona. And
Although you
I'd always
have been
talk
on a
myself out of it. I have been on a rock in Sedona, Arizona, funny enough. I talked myself out of it. I'm like, they're going to laugh at me. They're going to think I sweat too much. They're going to think I'm too big. I'm not going to be able to do everything. And it's all that negative self-talk that
Mm-hmm.
Nobody ever said that to me, and nobody was pointing and laughing at me. I mean, from the day I walked in, it was all community, and
Yeah.
everybody was so welcoming and so like loving and compassionate and kind. And I don't think I realized I needed that, but I had isolated myself so much from like the police world at that point. Some of it was self-imposed, some of it I felt like was work imposed. I was isolating myself from friends. I just didn't want to be around anybody anymore. And I didn't realize, I actually didn't realize I was doing it until I started to find this welcoming community again. So, very fast, I start going to a lot of yoga classes. And within the first 30 days, I told my wife that I was going to teach it. And she's like, well, you don't do anything a little bit, buddy. And I was good to my word because I was in a yoga teacher training program a couple months later, and here we are. I've been teaching yoga now for about a little over 3 years, and I've really gotten into this niche of I really like to teach beginners, which really blends well for the first responder culture because many of them have, I mean, like barely ever heard of yoga,
Yeah.
let alone actually done a practice or something like that. So, the way that I try to sell it to them is, try to suspend your disbelief. Whatever you think it's going to be like, I promise you, that's not how I teach. I'm
Yeah.
going to talk you through these moves. I'm not going to use a lot of goofy language. I'm going to talk a lot about your breath because I want you to focus on it because we tend to hold our breath when we do things that are hard. So, I want you to have a good experience. I want you to leave the mat and I want you to feel good in your body and your mind when you leave. And most of those people, if I can get them to come in the door and actually get onto the mat, they will come back and they will continue to come back. So, my goal from the get go has been I really want to use this to combat soldiers and first responder suicide because we are so much higher at risk than anybody else.
Yeah.
And it's because of all the things that we are asked to do in this work life where you're asked to do some really, really hard things and we're really, really good at it. But then when we're asked to transition into our private life, we don't do very good.
Yeah.
So it just causes this struggle, this emotional pain. And, there just has to be something that we can bring in to take care of people because I think the days are gone of listen, suck it up. I mean, I know that there are some of those people that are still around, but
Yeah.
I really think we got to get rid of that mindset. And I think when you look at a 20, 25, 30-year career, you're asking people to do an awful hard thing for a pretty long time. And you're asking them to work a lot of hours. You're asking them to not see their family. You're asking them to miss baseball games, birthday parties, all of these different things. Well, I think we have to focus on wellness. And I'm not, please understand, I'm not saying that, every police and fire department has to hire a yoga teacher. Am I all for it? Absolutely. However, I also understand the crowd I'm working with. Um, there's just got to be other ways that we can take care of ourselves. And then in turn, once we take better care of ourselves, I think we take far better care of one another. So that's really the goal. And that's kind of where I come at it from. I learned far better how to take care of myself. And I know we'll talk about that a little bit more as we move on. But I just wanted to kind of give you my journey, how I end up. Everybody that it's funny, and anybody that like connects with me through LinkedIn, I like before they ever have a conversation, they're like, "Listen, how do you get from cop to yoga teacher?" Well,
Yeah.
well, it's kind of an amusing story. Here we go. Um, so yeah, I
So
have
this is
learned
a
how to.
great
Yeah, go ahead.
story, and Jay and I come to this podcast um, from a couple different uh, points of view. Jay is a storyteller, and he very much believes in sharing personal stories, which you have done publicly and been vulnerable enough to let your story out. Jay has a story that he has shared. And, there's a lot of healing that comes from sharing those stories. And, Jay and I have come together to really talk about self-care. And your story just fits right into exactly what we're talking about, because there's so
Yeah.
many people out there that have your story. It might be not exactly like your story, but it's similar to your story. And I don't know where in life that we thought it was okay to dump all our stuff on lots of people and walk away from it, and then label
Right.
people as good or bad teacher, good or bad cop, good or bad nurse. It's like, I don't know how we got into those habits, but along the way, we dump all of our stuff on other people. Even pastors think about it. There's so many people, so many helpers out there that hear or see or experience their own traumas. And what do they do with that stuff? I don't know why we as a
Right.
society just kind of went along just saying that's okay. Uh, Goodness, the amount of tragedy that police officers have to see themselves, and horrible reporting of deaths to family members that are in shock. And, then you go home and do what with that? So it's no
Right.
wonder, bad habits start, like the drinking. And unfortunately, way too many of our law enforcement or military first responder friends that don't feel value anymore. I feel like their life isn't worth living. And that's the whole point of this self-care. Really, a lot of
Right.
this what Jay and I are trying to do comes out of that feeling. And how do we help people move from that feeling to a feeling of, like you said, calming our central nervous system, or helping our mind be more at ease. So I love that you tell the story. I love that you've gotten to this yoga piece. Jay, I know you're
And
probably thinking a million things.
so, so
I
what? So
am.
one of
Yeah.
the one of the big things about first responders is, as bad as they feel, as tired as they are, if you give them someone else to focus on, they will always focus on the other person, because they're
Well,
they're they're in this life of service,
That's
you
their
know.
identity. Yeah.
And right, and what happens when that's not there anymore? When you take that away, well, so what has happened to this person? Well, now they're a shell, and that's dangerous. Uh, and I say that from someone that actually walked through it. So I'm sorry, Jay. Go ahead.
No, 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 you're good. So much of what you said and everything struck me. And the first thing, Kathy, that kind of Kathy, you and I have talked about who helps the helpers. That's like kind of our question, like who helps the helpers. Um,
yeah.
but and it's funny, I was having a conversation with someone in the gym last night who works in the mental health field, and through that conversation, like literally right in the middle of the conversation, it struck me. It's like all of everyone's life is a search in trying to find who they are, and sometimes we are late in getting to that identity. Like myself, sometimes we lose that. We feel like we have it, we lose it, and we get lost and we get sidetracked, and we have this lack of understanding and knowledge to kind of get ourselves back on the right track to find out the center of who we are. And as a former personal trainer, Vance, some things that you were talking about the first time you walked into a yoga studio, and the preconception you had about what you thought people were going to think about
Mm-hmm.
you as a beginner. And I can't tell you how many times, and I still get it to this day, where, and I think Miss Kathy Castle might fit into this category, where their aversion to those environments is a preconception. And I've never been directly involved with the yoga community, but I've been in gyms all over the country. I've gone to seminars and shows and been around the fitness community all my life. And I can tell you, everywhere I've ever gone to work out and exercise has been nothing but supportive to whomever walked in that door.
Mm-hmm.
And I loved when you said that, you came to find out that the yoga community was the opposite of what you thought. It was
Mm-hmm.
welcoming, and they kind of embraced you and said, "Hey, come on, let's we'll do this together." But yeah, I a question kind of, and I asked a lot of our guests the same question: was there a point, and maybe there's not one specific point, was there a point after you had started doing the yoga for a while that you can kind of point back and say, okay, I can see this is pointing me in a better direction? Was there something after, I don't know, 6 months or a year or however long that you kind of like, you're like, okay, this is working. This is really starting to get me ready to go.
So I could feel benefits within the first couple classes where I could feel this
Hmm.
like release of emotions where you start to focus on your breath and I got to tell you that at this time I was concentrating so much just like not to drink, so
Hmm.
it helped to have something else to focus on. um, I will tell you that the moment that it really started to make sense, like so I'm going through yoga practices and I noticed that my mind feels better. I can, my body feels looser and stuff like that. But I didn't understand any of it. It wasn't until 2022 when I was going through a training program called Warriors at Ease, and that is it's a meditation and yoga program that was built in the military, and it's all about training combat vets. A lot of people that have symptoms of PTSD, and they do a fabulous job of actually breaking down the brain science and breaking down regulation of the central nervous system. And that's what I didn't understand. I didn't understand that, the police life teaches you to be in this elevated state of your sympathetic nervous system on a constant basis. And it's just not healthy to live there.
Yeah.
I didn't know any better. I thought I was supposed to be like alert at all times and, just in case, because whatever could happen and what if. And that actually creates this hypervigilance in all of us that if you can't turn it off at some point, uh, your body's just not meant to dump all these chemicals and letting cortisol just run through you at all hours of the day and night. And there's a lot of other health benefit or health detriments that come from doing that. So a lot of it comes from, and look, yoga became my thing, but there's all these different ways that you can start to soothe your central nervous system, make a friend of your central nervous system. And that's really where I started to see the huge benefits of it, because I wasn't practicing like the different kinds of yoga at that point. I had only really practiced like vinyasa or like flow classes where you're moving from pose to pose. What I find the biggest bang for my buck is it's more of a hatha yoga, which is it's a lot slower. And the reason that I like that and the reason that's the way I teach is because you have to be intentional. You have to be intentional even about the transitions, that when you move from one pose to the other. So you actually feel like your arm moving in space and you pay attention to how your foot is pressing down into the ground. That's all mindfulness. You can't be in the past and you can't be in the future when you're focusing on that stuff. So that's where I come at it from. That's why I always say my classes are mindfulness, breathing, some music. That's really what we're going to do.
It's
Let
funny
me
as you're
ask,
talking.
I want to ask a question after you, but go ahead, Jay.
Yeah. Yeah. It sounds, and look, as much as I know about fitness in general, I know very little about yoga, but it sounds like to me, it's very, how you were just describing it, is very being present
Mm-hmm.
and in the now.
Yep.
Because you're saying very intentional with just simple movements and transitions from one to another. Um, and that's just I just, that's a good general life thing. It's a yoga specific exercise or
Right.
but just and it's hard. It's so
Right.
hard because like Kath and I talked about, we want to be external, we want to be going a mile a minute, we want to have our fingers on all these things, but it's that even for that, however long the yoga class is, if you're just like with self care in general, if you're consistent and consistent and consistent, I'm sure that practice of being present and being in the now cumulatively just it can't help but carry over into
It
other
does.
parts of your life
It does.
outside of the class. Yeah.
Right. Because the next time and this is going to sound really stupid, but I'd been doing like yoga for a couple of months, and all of a sudden one night I'm like doing the dishes, and I'm standing there. It was like after dinner, and I'm just leaning and breathing, and I'm something that maybe would have irritated me before doesn't irritate me anymore. Uh, I just started to feel calmer, and it's because I'm not starting up here all the time. It's because I had finally been able to drop my nervous system down where I can actually fluctuate, and my window of tolerance actually started to get a little bit wider.
Yeah.
And I mean that's how the reason I really like it now is I explain this kind of stuff to people when I teach it, just because I want you to understand what's going on in your body. And it's a lot about being present, because it's hard to, when I start getting you to like stand on one foot, it's really hard. And you'll notice that as your mind might start to wander, or you might go to like, oh, I got to get milk after class. But you'll fall down. So
Yeah.
so you got to stay right there. And if you get to you get to a pose where you're feeling like a little bit of discomfort, and our natural instinct is that we're always supposed to have good vibes, right? That everything's always supposed to be positive, and anytime that something's bad, we run away from it. And that's another interesting lesson about yoga, that no, you stay and see if you can like lean in and just kind of stay there with your breath and slow it way, way, way down,
Yeah.
and just breathe. And you'll start to notice that's when your muscles start to get a little longer. Uh, yeah, I don't know if you can tell, but I'm a fan
Yeah.
of the yoga practice. So
They're
So
movements and positions that our bodies are just not used to. Just like when somebody walks into a gym with me and I've got to teach them exercises that they've not done before, they feel awkward at first, and they maybe aren't fully present because they determine they're going to fail because it's not what they're used to doing. So
right,
their
Mhm.
mind, like you're talking
right.
about mindfulness, their mind's over here. You use the milk after the class kind of thing. Uh, there's a lot of parallels, and I'm very intrigued by what you're yeah. Just yeah.
You sound like a prime candidate to come to a yoga class.
I would love to
I'll
try
go with
yoga
you.
class. I would love to
I'll
try
go
yoga
with
class
you.
sometime. I
Okay,
absolutely would. Go
you
ahead,
got it.
Kathy.
Here, this was my question. If somebody's listening, and your story is amazing, but if somebody's listening and they're like, what is this? Is going to sound really silly, but because I need to notice in their body if they're kind of rung up, and that sounds silly to say that because I know if I'm rung up, I probably know I'm rung up. But like, what when they don't have the patience to do something or whatever, what are people experiencing, and what is the answer to that? I mean, yes, there's yoga, but am I making any sense at all? Like, what if somebody was listening,
You
and
are.
so
So
'cause sometimes people are so lost they don't
who's a
know
good
what.
who
I could tell
yeah.
you I could tell you that when I was really kind of like in the pits of it, um, I felt kind of on edge, and I
Mm-hmm.
felt mad pretty much all the time, and like to the point where I could actually feel the heat in my body, and it felt like it was coming up into my face, and I was red all the time, and it took very little to set me off at that point, just because, like I said, I was living
Irritated.
up here all the
Mm-hmm.
time, and so
Oh, you
like the
mean living?
littlest
And
thing
when
would
you
just
said you're vigilant, you mean like you were worried that you're going to call and you have to go out, or you'd have
It's
to respond to
so
something?
you
Like that was
no, it's
part of
not
it.
even I can't even tell you that I'm worried about one specific thing. It's that
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sleeping enough. When I'm coming home, all I'm doing,
Yeah.
like I'm not eating dinner, I'm just
Which is self
drinking.
care.
So
Which
I
is self
right, I
care.
agree.
Eating, sleeping.
I'm not taking care of my actual body. I'm not taking care of my mind. So when I'm
Yeah.
faced with real world problems and real world situations, I'm not coming at it from a good place. So when I say I'm living up here, it's because my sympathetic nervous system is stuck, and it's at this on position, and it only knows how to fight, and that,
How to
so every
bark.
time it sets off, so
Yeah.
if you get irritated, you fight. And like I didn't have a reasonableness
Mm-hmm.
lever in there that I could actually bring it back down. And it wasn't that I'm not a nice guy. It's not that I'm not a reasonable guy. It's just I was just the best way I can put it is, if you think about like turning a car on, and leaving it in park, but stepping on the accelerator. I
Mm-hmm.
felt like I lived there, and I was never like the RPMs were never coming back down.
Yeah.
So I just, there was a lot of beauty in the fact of starting to learn how to settle everything down, and that's why, and I can feel it. I'll never be fixed, but
Mm-hmm.
I'm always going to be a work in progress. But I can pay attention to it a lot better now, and I can feel things come, and when they do, I know how to take care of it now, which I didn't before. Like sometimes I just
Mm-hmm.
need a good night of sleep. Sometimes I need to go to a hot yoga class. Sometimes I need to go jump in a big icy bucket of water. Or so there's all different types of things, and I know we'll get into the self care stuff here in a moment. But
Now,
uh,
Vance, that heightened state, would you kind of equate that similarly to muscle memory, but instead of muscle memory, it was maybe mind memory? Your mind had been kind of trained over years and years to be out of place because of what you did. That it was not regulated. It just kind of like
right,
if you play football or you play a specific sport, you kind of have trained your body to remember the movements.
yeah,
But in a negative way, your mind was on that heightened state, kind of like
To
similar to
react.
muscle memory. But I'm just going to call it
right,
mind memory, just
right.
for lack of a better lack
I
of a better
wasn't.
term.
I was no longer. I no longer had a pause in between somebody,
Mm.
like they would do something to me or say something to me, and I would just react. I would just pop right off.
Yeah,
Um, what yoga gives you is a pause that, and I don't know if I'm into quotes, and I use this a lot. Viktor Frankl, who was a Holocaust survivor, um, that says that that space between stimulus and response, like if you can widen that space, that's your freedom, because then you can choose.
yeah,
I wasn't choosing anymore. I was just wham, like stretching out
Reacting.
a rubber band and then letting it go. That's kind of how I felt. And then as 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 I work on my mind, I'm able to use the rubber band again. I'm able to let it come back down on its own.
not be so
Um,
tense. Yeah,
yeah, all the time.
yeah. So this might be a weird question, but because yoga has kind of like become a foundation for your life in a lot of ways. Are there other things besides yoga that you kind of are regular self care things that you enjoy doing, or that kind of what I call mindset shifters to kind of
Yep,
take you away from that
yep.
junk?
So the big one for me is sleep. That was a game changer. That I have at 7:45 every night. My phone will give me a reminder, and it'll go into its do not disturb, and then it goes off at 8:30. So from 8:30 to 4:30, my phone's in do not disturb. So that
Yeah,
there's 8 hours. I try to get 8, but I mean, if I got 7, great.
yeah,
That's what I need. Um,
Me too.
and when I go back to those days where I'm working overnight and I would work till 8 o'clock in the morning, and I would come home and I would sleep really, really hard for about 2 hours, and then I'd be up.
Mm.
And sometimes I go back to bed and sometimes I didn't. And when you didn't, um, oh my God, I'm
Wow.
miserable the next day. And I would just be
yeah,
bitchy like all the time.
yeah,
Uh, so there's something to be said about having a structure of your day, that
Wow.
um, going to bed and waking reasonably at the same time. I have to
Yeah.
do something physical in the morning, whether that be I'll lift weights, I'll do a yoga practice, I'll take a nice good walk with the dogs. I have to physically move my body for like at least 30 minutes. If I get a couple different physical exercises throughout the day, awesome, but I got to move my body in the morning.
yeah,
Mhm.
Um, and then the one that I found like a year ago, uh, is I really like to, I have a like a homemade cold plunge tub in my side yard, and I do that twice a week, where
mm,
like 2 coolers full of ice and fill it up with water, and try to sit in there for I try to sit in there for close to 15 minutes, and
yeah,
like I can feel the effects of that, and that
yeah,
it's just it's an interesting way to kind of trick your nervous system. Uh,
yeah.
but and I mean, not just for that, but like for information, because I am like a physical person, so it's good for that. Um, yeah, so I like all of those things. Um, I will tell you that the more I was a friend of mine who was a firefighter uh, had gotten into meditation, and he had told me about it, and I'm like, I can't just sit still and like not think. And he's like, that's not what it is. All right, tell me what it is. And the more I've learned about it, and with guided meditations and stuff like that, and that's actually the last certification thing that I went through was integrative restoration, which it's short. It's called IREST.
Oh
And
yeah.
again, born in the military, and it really helps people that have symptoms of PTSD and sleep disturbances. It helps them settle their mind so they can sleep. So
Yeah.
that was the most recent one that I did. That was in the spring, and Kathy actually got to experience that in late June. We did a class, and I ended it with IREST.
That was a
Uh,
good class.
everybody usually comes out of it feeling pretty good after we do that. So
Yeah.
that's just some of the things that I do. Oh, I
You know,
also
I
you know which one I didn't mention is I there's two more that I want to mention that
yeah,
I
please
talk to
do.
a therapist every week.
Mm.
Uh, we and I had gone to another therapist years and years ago, but it was sporadic, and it was when I made the appointment. Like, hey,
Mhm.
I think I need to talk, and the one reason that I'm going to tell you that it's interesting now. So I went back like a year ago, and there was an interview process for me to like get into this practice.
Yeah,
And
you told me.
then they actually like placed me with one therapist, and she's like, okay, here's the deal. We're going to meet every Tuesday at 2 p.m. and we're going to do that until I say no. Okay. So I just have a standing appointment every Tuesday.
Yeah.
And, sometimes we get deep. Sometimes we, just kind of talk about what's going on in life, but it's incredibly helpful. Uh, hey, and then the other one that I want to mention is the practice of Reiki, that's probably as hippy dippy as I'm going to talk about tonight, but I love it. And I actually am due to go back sometime soon. And for those of you that don't know, it is an energy healing practice where a practitioner will lay their hands on you, and it heals your chakra system. I hope I didn't lose anybody just now. So, but that's about as hippy dippy as I get.
And Jay and I talk about that kind of stuff too, because Jay and I have lists. We've had other sessions where we've named different things people can pick because we do believe, everybody has something that works for them. Vance and I went to something last night, and the police officer, it's like he starts his day with a cup of coffee. Jay and I start our day with a cup of tea.
T.
That's a whole
Yep.
thing.
Okay.
And everybody has their things that they put together. Jay and I both like massage. We both not
Yeah.
together, separately, get
We're with each
so
other.
Oh,
Yeah.
a couple's massage. How
not
nice.
together. I'm gonna start any weird rumors. But I know the person I go to, and we both have somebody that we go to differently but we go regular. Maybe it's like your Reiki, but I know with the
Yep.
with the person I go to, Colin, and we'll have Colin on here one day. But she does that. We talk about the chakra, and I can't believe that. I'm like, I can't talk about the chakra because somebody think I've just really gone over the edge. But Vance, when she's doing, so we do massage, lymphatic drain, the cranial, sacral, whatever she does, hocus pocus, and then the chakra stuff. I mean, sometimes I'll see different colors, and I'm
Yep.
like, man, it's
Yep.
like this is like tripping out and don't even know what's happening here. And but I just think our tissue, we build up inflammation. We got to find ways to move the toxic beds,
Toxins. Yep.
right?
Yep.
Like I'm drinking
Yep.
tart cherry juice now. My kids think I'm nuts, and I'm like drinking
Yep.
this little bit of
It's in
cherry
my
juice.
fridge right now.
Thank you, thank you.
Got it at Trader Joe's on our way home from Baltimore on Sunday.
One of my kids were like, "Where'd you pick that idea up?" I was like, "I read," but
Right.
you just gotta figure out what works to get your body straight because our bodies are this society that we live in is very consuming of our time and demanding of us, and it's difficult. So we've got to advocate for us, right? And
Yeah.
Right.
there's a little puppy therapy.
This is all right. So here's one of my other practices. Thank you. This is
Oh, look at
Madeline
the
Bell.
love.
Right.
Wait, hi.
Come on.
We took
Go
your
lay down,
daddy away.
kiddo. Right.
So
Yeah. All the
that's
rest of them are
cool.
passed out. But
Good stuff, Vance. Good stuff. So before we transition with a few minutes of movies and streaming, Kathy and I want to kind of give some updates on some stuff that's
okay.
coming up in our community. And I think, Vance, you're actually doing a sister walk to the one we're doing. Yours is in Salisbury, I believe I
Salisbury.
saw in your pit. Yeah, and
Yeah.
ours is coming up in a couple weeks in Easton. So I'll let Kathy talk about that one. And after you're done, Kathy, I'll talk about our live show in Oxford after that.
Yeah.
So
So this month of September is really big in our field of help, brain health and self-care and wellness. September and October, both of those months seem to be the time where you'll hear people like us all trying to push prevention awareness. So anyway, the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention is a great resource. They have lots of information on their website, afsp.org. And anyway, they have Out of the Darkness walks every year around this time. And communities all decide how to do it differently. If it's a town or a county or a region that combines together. So for our region, and Jeff Schultz is the person who's in charge of that initiative in our Midshore region here in Talbot County. But ours will be held in Easton on next weekend, right on Saturday the 21st at the Ottawa Park, and people can come, and it's a whole ceremony. And I think all of the Out of the Darkness walks probably are similar, and people will speak at those events, with different kind of experiences. Maybe somebody that has lost a family member by suicide, or somebody who maybe has had some thoughts themselves in the past, or somebody that's a healthcare provider. There's a lot of different people that speak. Honor, we have the honor beads of different color that honor our loved ones, our friends, our community members. And then we do a remembrance walk. So here, the one for our area is this Saturday the 21st, and I believe it starts at 10. People can gather though
9.
before then. Is it 9, Jay? Not the walk
This.
itself.
Oh well, I saw the sign. Somebody posted the sign that's actually at Ottawa. It says 9 o'clock on the sign.
Okay, so you come in that 9 o'clock hour, and there's different tables set up, tabling of Eastern Shore Talk's going to have a table. Channel
Eastern
Market's
Shore
going to have
Talk
a
will be
table.
tabling. Yep.
Our Midshore Suicide Coalition will have a table. But you can talk about different kind of resources that are out there, and then people will speak in remembrance for the walk, and then the actual walk occurs. So it's a nice event every year, and also money is raised to go toward suicide prevention and education. So that's that one. I don't know, Vance. You go ahead and promote that one that you're part of.
Okay. So the one that I'm a part of is going to be in Salisbury, and it'll be on October 12th at Winter Place Park. And this is going to be an evening walk. So it will start at 5, and it'll run till about 8 o'clock. So there'll be some speakers, there'll be a bead ceremony, and then we'll walk. I think there'll be some like glow sticks and be a nice evening. This will be the first time that I've ever participated in it. I get to speak during the opening ceremonies, and yeah, I'm looking forward to it. So that's not too far away at this point.
Other of your resources that you wanted to talk about, I know you have a lot of them that even the cop line or your recovery sessions that you have. I don't know if you want to
I think that
fill
well,
in.
those are I'm gonna talk about both of those because you brought it up. Those are wonderful. So the first one that you brought up is Cop Line, and that is a 24-hour a day, 7-day a week, 365-day a year operation, and it is a crisis hotline for police officers. And here's the really unique thing about it: it is when you call a Cop Line, number one, it's confidential. Number two, it's going to be answered by a retired police officer. So that means somebody that understands you, and you'll be like connected to one another almost immediately. And it's just a really interesting thing. and I'm happy to be a part of it. And that's been for the last like year and a half that I've been a volunteer listener for them. And then the other one that Kathy alluded to was we started a first responder recovery group, and we host meetings twice a month down in Berlin. And so we have an in-person option. Most of us usually come and meet in person. We have a Zoom option for anybody that does not live, like close to Berlin, Maryland. So I usually send out announcements uh, to local peer teams and local therapists that if you know of somebody that maybe we would benefit, or if they want to have a conversation offline, that's cool too. It's just I know that not everybody is necessarily going to stroll into an AA meeting. I know that not everybody wants to use wherever they come from, the city, county, state. They may not want to go through the employee assistance plan. So this is peers supporting one another. So if we can help in that manner, then we certainly will. So those are just a couple of the things that I'm kind of involved with on a daily, monthly basis.
And on the east,
Right.
absolutely. And on the Eastern Shore Talk end of things, as I've mentioned on social media, our first live episode of Eastern Shore Talk podcast will be Tuesday, October 1st at 5:30 at the Oxford Community Center. Our good friend Liza Ledford and the Oxford Community Center has extended this awesome opportunity. Liza is kind of the Liza is kind of the third unofficial co-host of Eastern Shore Talk, and she's got some Hollywood experience working for Steven Spielberg and some other places. So she runs a community center here in our area that they do plays, and it's just really cool place. And they've got state of the art equipment, and they're extending the opportunity for us to come down and start doing periodic live shows or live episodes down there once a month or so. And this will be our first one, October 1st. So it's going to be pretty cool to have a live audience, both in person and live streamed on social media, to ask questions and interact in real time. So it's going to be pretty cool. And it's going to be kind of a reintroduction of Eastern Shore Talk because we anticipate that there'll be a new audience for this episode.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to kind of talk about how the group came about, how my story has kind of led to the group, and how Kathy became involved. And then we'll take a few minutes and talk about movies like we do every episode for the podcast. So that'll be cool. And we're really looking forward to that. So speaking of movies, Kathy, I'm going to let you start off because you actually last Friday were able to watch a movie in the movie theater before I was, which never happens.
I beat you.
So,
I'm so proud I beat you.
And, well, but you beat me because the show you wanted to go to was sold out, so you had to go to an earlier one. So
Because I didn't listen. Imagine that.
so you saw Beetlejuice.
Yes. So I saw Beetlejuice. We both saw Beetlejuice. And then I did it backwards too. I went and saw Beetlejuice, and then I guess the TV was running the original Beetlejuice over and over and over again. So I think I saw that twice after I saw Beetlejuice. But
What did you think?
so listen, I'm a big sequel fan. So I went with Marty, and then I went with my parents. So I was like, yeah, this is great. This is amazing. And then when we all started debriefing, I realized that everybody was like, well, we were a little bit underwhelmed. And then I'm like, was I a little bit underwhelmed? Then I had to reevaluate. I was like, well, maybe I was a little bit underwhelmed. And then I was like, you guys, no, that was a good movie. That was a good movie. So after I watched, then I talked to you, and you're like, I'm a little underwhelmed. I was like, what's wrong with you guys? You guys are like so overstimulated in the movie. You're used to like Iron Man and the Hawk or whatever. Now you see a movie that's 30 years later, and you're like,
and it's funny. I was really looking forward to it. I'm like, oh yes, this is cool because I was caught up in the nostalgia of Beetlejuice.
right.
But as I'm sitting there watching, I'm like, my mind is, Kathy. I'm like, I think the idea of this was bigger than the reality. I did like the Deo scene at the funeral, and the audience was actually singing along in the theater.
Not in my show.
they weren't ours, and I was like, but after I'm like, oh, okay, maybe it's starting to go somewhere. That was it. That was the peak of the movie was that scene. And look, it wasn't terrible. I didn't walk out. I didn't fall asleep, but
I,
and I'm
I
sure it was
have a
sold out everywhere.
look. It's a week later, and I've had time to think about it. So all of you like poo pooers, I have a comeback for you. I think it is a good movie, and what I think is they brought in so much of the old movie. There's nods to the old movie all over the
Oh
place.
yeah,
They did a terrific job of that. And, I love that they brought what's her name? Jenna
Jenna
or
Ortega,
take it. Brilliant, brilliant. And then
perfect casting.
what's
Yes,
the mom? Why am I
Winona
blanking?
Ryder.
Winona Ryder. She did such a good job.
Boy, it had such an impact on you. You forgot all the actors in
I'm
it.
bad with names. She did such a good job of growing up, of making that character a grown up. I mean, there's a lot of thought into
And a
it.
successful TV personality.
And then,
Imagine that.
and I'm going to say this about Beetlejuice. He chilled out a bit. He was so annoying in the first one. I forgot how annoying he was. Like, I wanted to punch him in the face. That's awful. I should have, like, pretend punch him in the face, not real. But then, this is not a violent show. But the Beetlejuice, I was like, okay, I'm feeling a little bad for this guy. He's not as annoying. I'm sorry he's been dead and whatever forever. And I think he mellowed out a little bit. So there you go.
He kind of saves the day a little bit.
Yes.
He's still not the good guy, but he has some good qualities
He's
in
not
this
as
one.
annoying.
Yeah.
I'm going to say that was a good movie.
Okay.
I haven't gotten a chance to see it yet, but
Go
I am.
see it.
I'm very much looking forward to it. And we don't ever go to the theater, so like this might be one that we actually go because my wife knows how much I liked the original.
Yeah.
Like I did a Beetlejuice like nod a couple Halloweens ago. I had the black and white suit on. And,
I think you're going to like it. I think you're going to.
yeah, I can sit and watch that movie anytime. So as we start getting closer and closer to Halloween, like it'll just start being one more. So I of course I'll sit there and watch it every single time it comes on.
You just make one more because you got to say it 3 times anyway. They need to make one more.
Oh, I didn't think of that.
Yeah.
30 years from now?
No. They better come on with that. Jay, I do have something to tell you about Vance.
Okay.
Guess what he likes? Guess what he's a fan of? Just guess.
Ted Lasso.
Yeah. Yes.
Oh. I mean, who that has watched Ted Lasso is not a fan of Ted Lasso?
Right. Such a good show.
It's fantastic.
And great like messages and stuff like that. So,
it's all message. The whole thing is a message.
Right.
So I was happy to find that out. He's a Ted fan with us.
Yeah. Yeah. We were talking last night after we saw Jeff Thompson speak. So it was great.
Because I was telling him about Marnie in the book.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
She's an old high school, not classmate, but we went to high school with her, and she wrote the book, like Lasso, and she actually teaches leadership classes all over the place, and she uses Ted Lasso as kind of her foundation of how she teaches leadership.
I mean, how cool is that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So is there anything you watch, Vance, that you're like, yeah, this is what I'm hooked on?
All right, so I am pretty obsessed with like true crime, anything. So like I'll always watch those on. I'll always watch that on like Netflix.
Oh yeah.
And I'll always go back. And this is me as like as a kid. I was watching Unsolved Mysteries with Robert Stack, and I can still like just go back and watch those now. And I like it's like no time has gone on. And I listen to a lot of that stuff podcast wise. So whenever I tell people, because all my playlists and stuff like that.
Do you watch the one? Do you watch the podcast called Betrayal? Have you seen that one?
Really good.
Yeah,
I watched that. I watched that on Hulu.
Yeah, really I love that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a. I've actually watched that maybe 2 or 3 times.
What about American Nightmare?
Amazing.
I would love to hear your opinion on that because law enforcement.
I don't know what any of you are talking about, FYI, but keep going.
Nothing.
And don't get me,
Kathy. Finally, something we don't connect on.
I know. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, American Nightmare is a crazy story. I did not know that story. before seeing it on Netflix.
That's wild. And don't get me wrong, the story that the two victims told sounds so outrageous
Right.
that most people wouldn't believe it. But just that it took that one person who was in a different state in Lake Tahoe, the
Right.
detective there, to say, wait a minute. And that's how, what was the one, I can't think of the name of it, young girl that was a rape victim. And,
that they did
serial rapist.
Oh, I was going to say, I thought you were talking about, there's one called like Unbelievable.
Yes.
Something like that.
Yes.
Okay, it is that one.
Yeah, I love that one too.
It was very good. Very well done.
The two female detectives were finally the one that believed this young girl because she had changed her story back and forth because nobody would believe her.
Yep.
And finally, these two female detectives, Kathy and I talked about this on the podcast. I love that one.
So the one that stuck with me from like early age is, and this is old. I mean, this is before I was born. Is the D.B. Cooper case, where you know the guy that hijacks a plane and jumps out of it in the cover of darkness. So I watch all the specials about that, and I actually just finished listening to a book all about it, and there's apparently podcasts that are just devoted to that and finding different suspects and things like that. It's all fascinating. Still the only unsolved skyjacking. So yeah, and then all right. So the one on a different note, you know, because the true crime, not everybody's into that, and everybody's like, oh my god, what a bummer. My wife and I just finished, and I think we're actually a little behind. We just finished Top Chef 21. So we've always been into that. We like that. You know, we don't watch a ton of reality shows, but we really like that show. And we try to. There's usually something we are watching together. We just started. So after we finished Top Chef, and that was just like last week, we started the new. Jake Gyllenhaal is on a show on Apple Plus. Is it Presumed Innocent? I think that's what it's called.
He's a lawyer. He plays a lawyer.
Yeah. So we've only seen the first episode, and we're both hooked. So I might be watching an episode of that after we get done tonight.
There you go.
I love watching something like that with somebody else because, like, I get all worked up and I'm like, gosh, get out. You know, I'm like very animated when I'm into that kind of stuff, which would make Jade nuts because Jade would not want to be calm.
I started watching actually I finished the whole series. It was so good. Brand new on Netflix called The Perfect Couple.
My wife was watching that last night.
Nicole Kidman, Liev Schreiber, Dakota Fanning. Really good. It's very murder mystery.
Right?
It's a series. I watched all the season. It's a series. All the season 1 is out. 6 episodes. I watched the whole season.
I didn't realize it was a series. I thought it was a movie.
It's so good. It came from a book. It's really good.
I didn't know that, and it had popped up on Netflix for me, and Amy was watching it when I got home last night, and I was like, "How is it?" And she goes, "Oh, I actually listened to the book," and I'm like, "Oh, I didn't really realize it was a book." So
yeah, I didn't know that until I heard somebody else on another podcast talk about it. But I liked it a lot. It's very, like I said, murder mystery. It's kind of very like wealthy, entitled, snobby family. This girl that kind of comes from the other side of the tracks is marrying into this family. Huh. Nicole Kidman and Liev Schreiber are the rich married couple that are supposed to be the perfect couple. Nicole Kidman plays an author. And yeah, it's really good. Good cast. It's very, I love the mysteries. I just love the whodunit kind of shows, and it's very much like that. It's I'm not going to give much away because there's some twists and turns that you don't really expect. But
she got into it, so I'll have to maybe catch up. And
like I said, I watched all 6 episodes right back to back right in a row. I liked it that much.
I don't know how it is.
You're like, I thought I had plans tonight, but I'm just going to watch this.
Vance, I don't know how it is in your house, but if somebody like does that, like one night one period of time we were watching Cobra Kai, and there was a couple of our kids were watching it with us, and then one went away for the weekend, and then we just binged, and he's so bitter. He still hasn't finished the series because he was so mad at us.
Oh.
So there's that we cheating on each other.
We would have the talk like, hey, I want to watch this. And then it's all right. But like I remember that actually happened to 2 of our friends. that like they were watching something. He's like, "You cheated on me."
It
You know,
is.
so
This is a real problem. The streaming cheat. It
Yeah.
happens in families. It's a deal breaker.
So before we get out of here, Vance, I want you to let everybody know where they can get a hold of you for possible classes if they're in the Ocean City area, and if they're not, maybe some advice for somebody who might want to start taking some yoga classes.
yeah, for sure. So at current, I am not teaching anything like locally studio wise. It's not that I won't, but I would set up something like a pop up, or I would set up something privately just for someone else. The best way to get a hold of me is through my website, and that is yoga-rescue.com. And you can send me a message through that, and I'll usually answer you within about 24 hours. You can also
Gotcha.
send a message to me through my Instagram. You can send it through my Facebook, whatever, whatever is easiest for you. Hey, look, if you're interested in getting into yoga, and you're like, I'm not going to show up in a class, okay, I get it. YouTube is such a
Mm.
wealth of free classes, and I'm going to give you a very specific person, and her name is Adrienne, and it's yoga with Adrienne. And for somebody that doesn't know anything about yoga, she'll do like 15, 20, 30, she'll do 60-minute classes, but you don't need to devote that amount of time, and she's just very deliberate about how she teaches. And so I just think she's a really great person to start with. um, I am trying to create more stuff for YouTube so that people can do practices with me that don't necessarily live next to me or work on a very different schedule than what I work on. So I'm working on it. I have a little bit up now, but yeah, I'm working on getting more of that.
Awesome. Well, Vance, I can't say how much I appreciate. Can't say enough how much I appreciate you stopping on here and
Yeah,
telling everybody your story and talking about the importance of self care through yoga and through centering yourself and just kind of being present and the whole 9 yards. And um,
for
hopefully
sure.
we can, as you kind of start doing some other things, we'll have you back on and
Okay.
have some more chats with you.
All right, it's a date. Thanks for having me, guys.
Yep,
I
no
hope you guys have
problem.
a wonderful evening, and I'm sure we'll catch up again soon.
All right,
Sounds
guys,
good.
I appreciate it. Thanks for joining us on here on Eastern Shore Talk. And don't forget, you can check us out on all our usual social media places and on the website, easternshoretalk.org. Thanks for joining us, and we will see you next time. Take care, guys.